Great white sharks reign supreme from the sun-drenched coasts of California to the frigid depths of Antarctica. These ocean giants, boasting rows of serrated teeth and powerful bodies exceeding 20 feet in length, strike fear in the hearts of humans and prey alike. But their hunting grounds extend far beyond the typical image of a tropical paradise. Prepare to dive into the chilling truth. Great white shark attacks can happen anywhere, anytime. The parasail bulged like a giant, colorful balloon in the wind, carrying Sarah Williams higher and higher above Rainbow Bay on this sun-drenched July 8, 2009. The sprawling Gold Coast of Australia stretched out below her in miniature, the roar of the surf replaced by the gentle whoosh of wind against the fabric. It was a perfect day for this once-in-a-lifetime adventure. A birthday gift from her thrill-seeking boyfriend, Jake Johnson, who piloted the speedboat that towed her skyward. Sarah, an office worker usually confined to a windowless cubicle, felt a surge of liberation. The nagging worries about deadlines and reports faded away, replaced by a sense of awe at the world's vastness from this unique perspective. Jake, waving cheerfully from far below, was now the size of an ant, his boisterous grin just a speck on the turquoise water. For a moment, life felt like a joyful adventure rather than an endless routine. The coastline snaked away in either direction, a patchwork of sandy beaches and rocky headlands. Schools of silvery fish darted under the parasail's shadow, their movements hypnotic. Sarah had always felt safe swimming in these waters, reassured by the presence of lifeguards perched on their tall chairs and the familiar sight of surfers bobbing on the horizon. Today, she felt a strange sense of unease, exposed and vulnerable far above the protective shoreline. Great white sharks, though not as common as in some parts of the world, were known to patrol Australia's coastline. The thought usually didn't bother Sarah despite the occasional sensationalized news story. Yet something about the interplay of her shadow and the sun dappling the ocean stirred a primal fear, a nagging sense that she wasn't alone. She pushed the unsettling thought aside, reminding herself of the rarity of shark attacks and trying to focus on the exhilarating beauty of the flight instead. The boat slowed, the engines sputtering as Jake adjusted their course. Sarah felt a gentle dip as they changed direction, the view of the coastline shifting. Below, the water changed from a bright, inviting blue to a murkier green. It looked deeper out here, a vast expanse that made her stomach twist like no roller coaster. Her heart thumped faster as she searched the depths below, straining to see any signs of marine life. She told herself she was being ridiculous. Fear had no place on this perfect day meant for making memories. Jake shouted something to her, but the wind carried his words away. Suddenly, the parasail lurched downwards violently, tugging hard against the harness she wore. Sarah gasped, her view tilting wildly as the boat accelerated at an impossible speed. Then a horrifying realization struck her. She wasn't being pulled by the boat anymore. Something else had the line. Sarah screamed, a raw sound of terror lost in the roar of the wind. The parasail twisted violently, sending her spinning sickeningly. Below, the surface of the water churned with an ominous force. Then, in a heart-stopping moment, the monstrous shark breached the surface, its massive jaws snapping open in a spray of salt water just inches from the dangling lines. Sarah's harness creaked under the strain as the shark's weight jerked her downwards. The water was suddenly shockingly close. Time seemed to distort as Sarah yanked through the air and plunged violently below the surface. Cold water enveloped her, a suffocating shock after the freedom of the sky. Salt water burned her eyes and lungs as she fought against the tangled mess of the parasail, her limbs flailing. Then, just as suddenly as she'd been pulled under, Sarah was yanked upwards, gasping for air. She blinked, salt water stinging her eyes as she realized the shark had released its grip on the line. However, the danger was far from over. The parasail, ripped and partially deflated, struggled to stay airborne. Sarah was being dragged relentlessly through the water, her body feeling like the sheer force would tear it apart. Each time a wave crashed over her, it was a struggle to surface again. She could see the shore in the distance, a tantalizing strip of safety that seemed impossibly far. Her muscles burned with the effort of clinging to the shredded lines. Panic warred with a desperate survival instinct. Below, the dark shape of the shark circled ominously, always just out of reach. Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before it attacked again. On the shoreline, a crowd had gathered, alerted by Sarah's frantic movements and the strange behavior of the parasail. Jake finally realized the horrific danger Sarah was in and gunned the boat towards her, shouting for her to hold on. As Sarah felt she couldn't endure another second, a new terror seized her. The shark launched upwards with horrifying speed, its massive body crashing into the remains of the parasail. The harness snapped. Sarah plummeted through the air, a desperate cry escaping her lips as she braced for the impact. The water hit her with bruising force, knocking the wind from her lungs. She fought to stay conscious as the relentless waves crashed over her, disorienting her further. Spots danced before her eyes and her battered body begged for respite. Strong hands hauled her out of the ocean and into the boat when she began to sink into the welcoming darkness. Jake's face was a mask of anguish as he bundled her into a rough blanket, shouting for emergency services. On the beach, horrified onlookers were already calling the Coast Guard. News helicopters appeared on the horizon, drawn by the promise of a dramatic rescue story. Coughing and shivering, Sarah was rushed to the hospital. Miraculously, her injuries were limited to cuts, bruises, and a mild concussion. But the emotional aftermath was far more severe. Nightmares of the shark's menacing shape and the endless pull of the waves haunted her sleep. The joy she had once found in the ocean was tainted with a new understanding of its unpredictable power. The attack in Rainbow Bay became a local sensation. Sarah reluctantly found herself fielding calls from reporters, reliving the ordeal each time. Yet she also discovered a newfound sense of gratitude. The ordinary moments, once taken for granted, felt precious now. The world itself seemed brighter. She had cheated death in the depths of the ocean, and her perspective on life would never be the same. The parasail swelled like a giant rainbow-colored jellyfish, carrying Ethan, Anya, and Lucas high above the sparkling waters surrounding Isla Flores in the Bahamas. It was November 15, 2007, and the vibrant coral reefs shimmered through the turquoise depths, teeming with colorful fish. This was their dream vacation, a break from the pressures of university life, a chance to soak up the sun and create memories that would last a lifetime. Ethan, the cautious planner of the group, was finally starting to relax. The gentle sway of the parasail and the salty ocean breeze had replaced his usual worries about deadlines and presentations. Anya, his free-spirited girlfriend, was a whirlwind of energy even hundreds of feet above the water, pointing excitedly at a pod of dolphins in the distance. Lucas, ordinarily shy and absorbed in his science fiction novels, laughed out loud, his usual sarcasm replaced by a sense of childlike wonder. The Caribbean was known for its diverse marine life. While sharks were present in these waters, the waters around Isla Flores were considered relatively safe, with most shark species being smaller and non-threatening. The friends, caught up in their vacation excitement, barely gave it a second thought. Their laughter bounced off the ocean's surface, carried by the gentle breeze towards the boat towing them. Their carefree mood was contagious, infecting the stern-faced boat captain with a reluctant smile. This was the picture-perfect tropical escape they had all desperately needed. Ethan felt unease as the boat circled a particularly stunning section of the reef on this sunny November afternoon. The water below was deeper, losing its vibrant turquoise hue and turning to a darker blue. He knew sharks often preferred deeper water, and a familiar sense of caution crept back in. He glanced at Anya and Lucas, wondering if he should voice his concern, but they were lost in the moment's joy. Oblivious to Ethan's worry, Anya leaned over the edge of the harness, trying to get a better look at what lay below. Lucas was describing his latest video game idea, gesturing animatedly. Just then, Ethan noticed an enormous shadow pass beneath their parasail. A chill went down his spine. This was no ordinary fish. This was something far more extensive and more menacing. He tried to shout a warning, but it was too late. A massive great white shark, far more giant than any they would have expected this close to shore, erupted from the water, its jaws reaching towards them with horrifying speed. The boat captain yelled in alarm, realizing the danger in a split second. Time seemed to shatter as the shark's teeth slashed through the parasail's lines with jarring force. Ethan, Anya, and Lucas were thrown into the air. Their screams were lost against the rush of the wind. as their makeshift parachute collapsed around them. In the chaos of the fall, they tumbled, limbs flailing, desperate for something to grab onto. The impact as they hit the water was brutal. Lucas felt a sharp pain in his shoulder as his body slammed against the surface. Ethan choked as the icy water filled his lungs, shocking him into a desperate fight for survival. Anya surfaced only to be dragged down again by the remnants of the parasail, her limbs tangling in the lines. The shark circled in the churning water, the frenzy of the attack momentarily disorienting it. Ethan, gasping for breath, thrashed wildly, trying to keep his head above the surface. He saw Lucas, face pale, trying to untangle himself from ropes and fabric that clung to him with deadly force. For a horrifying moment, Anya disappeared from view, submerged beneath the mess of the deflated parasail. Panic threatened to consume Ethan. Then, fueled by sheer adrenaline, he swam frantically towards Lucas, the silhouette of the shark a constant menacing presence nearby. With strength he didn't know he possessed, he helped Lucas haul himself free of the tangled lines, the water around them swirling red with Lucas's blood. Suddenly, Anya resurfaced, coughing and sputtering. Ethan and Lucas lunged for her, dragging her away from the wreckage. The shark closed in, seemingly recovering its focus, drawn by the commotion and the scent of blood. The boat captain wasn't going to abandon them without a fight. With frantic maneuvering, he positioned the small craft between them and the predator. He yelled at them to try and get on board, his voice a lifeline in the chaos. Kicking desperately, they made their way towards the boat's safety. Each second felt like an eternity, every splash inviting another attack. As Anya's hand finally grasped the railing, a sense of relief washed over Ethan. Yet his heart sank as he realized Lucas wasn't with them. Frantic, he searched the water, seeing his friend struggling several yards from the boat. Lucas's injured shoulder made it impossible for him to swim strongly, and the current started pulling him away. The shark, sensing weakness, cruised closer, its movements chillingly predatory. Ethan knew he had a split-second decision to make. He could haul himself onto the boat's safety or risk everything to save his friend. He didn't hesitate. Kicking off his sandals, he dove back into the water, the fear a knot in his stomach. The shark, momentarily distracted by a school of panicked fish, hadn't noticed Ethan's bold re-entry. With agonizing strokes, Ethan pushed his way towards Lucas, who was now shouting with terror. As the shark turned, realizing its prey was still within reach, Ethan closed the final distance to Lucas and shoved him bodily towards the boat. A searing pain ripped through his leg as the shark, in a confusing swirl of teeth and foam, lashed out at him. With a surge of desperate strength, Anya and the boat captain pulled them both on board in the nick of time as the shark circled back frustrated. On the boat, chaos reigned. Lucas was sobbing, cradling his injured shoulder, while Anya tried to assess the ragged wound on Ethan's calf. The rest of the journey back to the resort was a blur. Aligned by the Mayday call, Coast Guard vessels met them near the shore. Ethan was rushed to the small island clinic, the pain in his leg a constant burning reminder of how close they all had come to death. The gashes needed stitches, but his injury was minor compared to what might have been. The attack was all anyone on Isla Flores could talk about for weeks. The image of the monstrous shark haunted Ethan's nightmares, and the ocean, once his favorite place, seemed to hold a dark secret. Life on the island would never be quite the same. The tropical paradise forever tainted with the knowledge of the predators lurking in the waters below. The parasail bulged above Lily Evans, catching the warm Pacific wind like a brightly colored sail. Below her, the sparkling waters of the famed Kaanapali beach on the Hawaiian island of Maui teemed with tropical fish, a kaleidoscope of color visible even from high above the waves. This was a solo adventure, a gift to herself after months of demanding workdays and relentless stress in Los Angeles. Today, September 22, 2005, was all about escape. A successful marketing executive, Lily felt a sense of freedom, unlike anything she had experienced in years. The relentless demands of her clients and the constant pressure to deliver results faded into the background. High above the scenic Hawaiian coastline, she was weightless and carefree, a world away from the relentless hustle of her usual life. The gentle tug of the line tethering her to the boat was comforting. Below, the experienced crew handled the maneuvering while she enjoyed the breathtaking views. Today wasn't about achieving a goal or meeting a deadline, but simply being. Lily, usually focused and driven, allowed herself to luxuriate in the pure enjoyment of the moment. Despite Hawaii's reputation for tiger sharks, the waters around Maui were considered relatively safe. Great whites were incredibly rare this far out in the Pacific. The locals had reassured her that shark encounters here were exceedingly uncommon. Lily, usually a worrier, let go of her fears and embraced the thrill of the experience. Suddenly, a dark shape detached itself from the shimmering depths below. Moving with shocking speed, it glided ominously beneath her parasail. Lily's carefree joy turned to a jolt of fear. The shark seemed to mirror her movements momentarily, a silent predator fixated on its prey. Lily thought that perhaps it was a dolphin, but her common sense rebelled. No dolphin was that large. This was a great white shark, its movements smooth and purposeful. She watched in horrified fascination as it circled, seemingly sizing her up. Her heart pounded in her chest, an insistent rhythm of terror that drowned out the gentle rush of the wind. Time seemed to bend strangely. Below, the boat seemed impossibly far away, no longer a reassuring presence. It was just her, alone against a creature perfectly evolved for hunting. Panic threatened to overwhelm Lily as her worst fear turned into a terrifying reality. The shark, with chilling precision, began to ascend towards her. She could see its eyes now, devoid of anything resembling warmth or recognition. There was just cold calculation, a single-minded determination to feed. With a sickening jolt, she felt the parasail lines go taut as the shark lunged upwards. Its massive form thrashed on the surface, snapping at the parachute's fabric. The force of the impact ripped her violently sideways, and the harness strained against her body. Lily screamed, a raw sound of fear swallowed by the vastness of the sky and sea. Then, as suddenly as it attacked, the shark disappeared into the depths. Lily dangled precariously, the sudden silence almost more terrifying than the frantic attack. She knew it was only a reprieve. The predator was down there, biding its time, waiting for another opportunity. The crew on the boat had finally realized Lily's dire situation. They were frantically maneuvering closer, yelling for her to stay still. It seemed like an eternity before the boat edged near. One of the crew tossed a rope towards her legs, shouting at her to grab on for dear life. Desperation fueled her as she fumbled for the rope, her fingers numb and clumsy with fear. The shark could reappear at any second. She just needed a moment, a chance to escape. Just as her fingers finally secured a hold, she felt an agonizing jolt as weight seized the rope. In a frenzy of thrashing and foam, the shark erupted from the water again. Its jaws locked on the rope just inches from Lily's legs, and time splintered as she watched the boat being pulled backward with jarring force. If the rope snapped, she would be thrown into the water directly in the path of the monstrous predator. Then a gunshot rang out across the water. The shark thrashed wildly, releasing the rope. A second shot echoed, and the giant predator finally retreated, leaving a trail of blood in its wake. Lily could vaguely see a second boat out of the haze, its occupants part of the rescue effort. With shaking hands, Lily grasped the rope again, and the crew pulled her towards the boat with terrifying speed. Collapsing into the rough wooden flooring, she gasped for breath, unable to halt the sobs that racked her body. She was alive, but the ocean would never again feel like a place of carefree joy. Back on shore, the attack became local news, a grim reminder that nature's dangers lurked even in paradise. Though Lily's physical wounds were minor, the emotional scars ran deep. Nightmares of the shark's menacing eyes haunted her long after her return to California. She hired a therapist and learned coping mechanisms to manage the trauma. But the primal fear of the open ocean never fully abated. The solo adventure meant to be a source of freedom and escape irrevocably changed Lily. She rebuilt her life, finding joy in other pursuits. Yet on quiet nights, when the wind whipped through her window, she would cast a frightened glance towards the horizon, imagining the silent depths and the predators that lurked beneath the waves. The parasail bloomed against the impossibly clear sky of the Aitutaki Islands in the Cook Islands, carrying Natalia Perez, Ben Carter, and Zara Patel like a collection of colorful wind-borne flowers. Beneath them stretched the impossibly idyllic islands, a cluster of paradise nestled in the heart of the South Pacific. This was the final stop on their grand backpacking adventure, a chance to experience untouched beauty before their return to the real world of deadlines and routines on this sunny July 17, 2003. Natalia, a restless adventurer with a contagious grin, was the instigator of the trip. She thrived on new experiences, pushing her limits and dragging her friends along. Ben, a cautious history buff, had reluctantly found himself caught up in Natalia's whirlwind, secretly grateful for the break from his dusty library books. Zara, a gentle soul passionate about photography, added a touch of serenity to their trio. The postcard-perfect Aitutaki Island seemed like the safest place on Earth. The friendly locals, with their sun-kissed smiles and relaxed demeanor, reassured them that the waters were free from any significant predators. Still, stories of the legendary great white known as the Leviathan were whispered by the island elders as cautionary tales. The friends dismissed the lore as mere folklore, their youthful optimism overshadowing any lingering sense of dread. From their vantage point hundreds of feet above the lagoons, the vibrant coral reefs seemed to glow in the sun. Schools of fish darted beneath the clear water, creating mesmerizing patterns against the white sand. Natalia pointed excitedly at the outlines of giant turtles gliding through the gentle currents. Zara snapped photo after photo, striving to capture the moment's magic. Even Ben, usually the most reserved of the group, couldn't hide the wonder in his eyes. The crew on the boat far below seemed like tiny figures, signaling them to enjoy their flight's remaining minutes before reeling them back in. The motor's hum and fellow tourists' soft chatter created a comforting sense of normalcy. The ocean felt vast but not threatening, and the fearsome legends of the Leviathan faded into distant background noise. Suddenly, something rippled beneath the surface near their parasail. A chill ran down Natalia's spine, a primal instinct screaming that this was no harmless fish. A sense of unease prickled along her arms as she focused on the dark shape circling ominously beneath their parasail. It grew larger with every rotation, her grin fading into a look of concern. Natalia called out to Ben and Zara, but the wind carried her voice away. Then, in a surge of movement that seemed to defy physics, the massive shark breached the surface. Its jaws, filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth, stretched wide in an impossible display of predatory power. Time fractured as the terrifying reality took hold. The shark hit the parasail lines, sending Natalia, Ben, and Zara hurtling towards the ocean in a tangle of cloth and desperation. Natalia's stomach lurched as the icy water enveloped her. She crashed through the surface, the remnants of the parasail snagging her. In the disorienting swirl, she saw the monstrous form of the shark pass just inches away, a flicker of white teeth and chillingly blank eyes. Terror fueled her as she kicked and fought, finally ripping herself free of the fabric. Frantically, she scanned the water for Ben and Zara, spotting them struggling nearby. The shark was circling, its movements deliberate, ready for another strike. The boat seemed like an impossible dream, a tiny speck against the vastness of the ocean. A crowd had formed on the shore, their shouts of alarm swallowed by the wind. Despair threatened to engulf her. Suddenly, Zara screamed. Natalia watched in horror as her friend flailed wildly, a spray of crimson blooming around her in the water. The shark thrashed, dragging Zara beneath the surface in a frenzy of foam. Fueled by adrenaline, Ben reached for her, his fingers missing her outstretched hand as she disappeared. Sobbing, Natalia and Ben clung to each other, a desperate bid for comfort against the swirling nightmare. The water around them churned red, and the scent of blood drove the shark into a heightened state of attack. With each pass of its monstrous form, they held their breath, waiting for the final fatal strike. A gunshot rang out, momentarily cutting through their terror. Another followed, and then another. A small dinghy appeared seemingly out of nowhere, a team of islanders with rifles positioned precariously on the tiny craft. It aimed at the shark, providing a welcome distraction. With renewed desperation, Ben and Natalia started swimming towards the approaching boat. The dinghy pulled alongside, rough hands hauling them on board. They collapsed onto the floor of the small vessel, the full impact of what had just transpired finally crashing over them. The islanders brought them ashore, not to the familiar beaches of the Aitutaki Islands, but to a small, uninhabited stretch of sand, a desolate refuge in their storm of terror. They were safe for now. But the island offered little respite. The ocean, transformed from paradise into a killing field, was an omnipresent threat. The shark, they knew, still patrolled the surrounding waters, its hunger unsated. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the island, the full horror of their predicament hit Natalia and Ben. They were stranded, survivors of the initial attack, but now exposed on this barren island, with a relentless predator lurking offshore. They scoured the island for anything edible, subsisting on meager scraps of shellfish and coconuts. They built signal fires, desperately scanning the horizon for rescue, but their hopes dwindled with each passing day. The vast emptiness of the ocean offered no relief, the shark a constant, unseen presence. Despair started to creep in, a chilling counterpoint to the adrenaline that had kept them fighting. Then, on the brink of exhaustion, they spotted a flicker of white on the horizon. A sail, small at first but growing larger with each passing minute. With a surge of hope, they frantically reignited their dwindling signal fire and waved the tattered remnants of their parasail. It took hours, but finally the boat reached them. It wasn't a grand rescue vessel, just a small fishing boat with a crew who had been alerted to their plight by the islanders. Tears of relief streamed down Natalia and Ben's faces as they were pulled aboard. They were weak, battered, and haunted by their near-death experience. But they were alive. The news of the incident sent shockwaves through the Aitutaki Islands. The whispers about the Leviathan transformed from legend into a chilling reality. Locals nervously scanned the waters, their once carefree relationship with the ocean forever tainted. Natalia and Ben, haunted by the attack, found little solace in the fact that they had survived. The salty spray kissed Emily Dubois' cheeks as she leaned over the boat's railing, the azure expanse of the French Riviera stretching out before her like a painter's canvas. Today, June 12, 2004, marked their 5th wedding anniversary, and the air thrummed with the unspoken promise of an afternoon filled with laughter and joy. Thomas Fournier, her ever-patient architect husband, stood beside her, his usually meticulous hair tousled by the playful breeze. Earlier that morning, Emily surprised Thomas with a picnic basket overflowing with crusty baguettes, creamy brie, and a chilled rose. They had driven down from their Parisian apartment, leaving behind the city's relentless hum for the charming coastal town, nestled snugly against the sapphire waters. The day had unfolded like a dream, strolling hand in hand along the cobbled streets, stopping to admire the vibrant displays of fresh produce at the local market, and culminating in a shared laughter-filled lunch under the shade of a sprawling fig tree. Now, as the boat sliced through the crystal-clear water, Emily excitedly pointed out landmarks to Thomas. The iconic red-roofed houses clinging precariously to cliffs, the bobbing sailboats like white butterflies flitting across the surface, and the distant silhouette of a medieval castle perched on a rocky outcrop. A sense of carefree exhilaration bubbled within her. Suddenly, Thomas nudged her and gestured towards a group clustered around a booth displaying colorful parasail rides. Emily's eyes lit up. While parasailing wasn't exactly Thomas's cup of tea, he preferred the solid ground beneath his feet. He knew how much Emily loved the thrill of a new experience. With a playful grin, he suggested they give it a go. A surprise for her part of the day's adventure. They were harnessing themselves into the gadget, and a wave of nervous excitement washed over Emily as the boat pulled away. The parasail billowed above them like a giant, vibrantly colored jellyfish. The world shrunk below them as they ascended, the quaint towns along the Côte d'Azur now resembling a child's intricate building block city. The gentle breeze and the rhythmic tug of the tow line lulled them into a sense of contentment. Then, as Emily traced the shoreline with her finger, a flicker of movement in the water below caught her eye. A large, elongated shadow passed beneath them, momentarily blocking the sunlight filtering through the crystal-clear water. A playful joke about a playful whale escaped her lips, but a sliver of unease lodged in her stomach. The shadow circled back, growing larger with each rotation. Her heart pounded in her chest as the unmistakable outline of a great white shark came into focus, its sleek, menacing form shattering the idyllic serenity of the moment. The boat captain's initial shouts of alarm felt muffled against the roar of the ocean and the blood pounding in Emily's ears. Thomas's grip on her hand tightened, his face stark white. The shark ascended rapidly, its eyes seeming to fixate on their vulnerable position with chilling intelligence. With a burst of speed that belied its size, the massive predator lunged toward them, its jaws gaping open in a terrifying display of power. The flimsy fabric of the parasail was no match for its teeth, which tore through the material like tissue paper. Emily and Thomas were sent crashing downwards in a chaotic flurry of snapping lines and shrieking fabric. The impact as they hit the water was brutal. Emily gasped, icy water filling her lungs and blinding her. The remnants of the parasail tangled around her limbs, dragging her further below the surface. She kicked frantically, her instinct to survive, battling against the overwhelming panic. Finally breaking free, she gasped for air, her lungs burning, her heart thundering in her chest. Thomas resurfaced beside her, coughing and sputtering. They exchanged a desperate glance, searching for any sign of the shark. For an agonizing moment, the water around them seemed deceptively calm. Then the massive form reappeared, circling a chilling promise of another attack. The boat was closing in, but with horrifying speed, the shark headed directly for Emily. Just as she braced herself for the impact, it veered away, and she felt a searing pain erupt in her leg. A rush of water muffled her scream as she was briefly pulled beneath the surface again. Then strong hands hoisted her upward, hauling her unceremoniously back onto the crowded boat. Sobbing, she collapsed on the rough wooden floor, her gaze fixed on Thomas, who was still struggling against the shark's relentless circling. The captain maneuvered the craft between them, creating a temporary barrier against the massive predator. Thomas reached out desperately as the crew pulled him on board, his face a mask of terror. On the cramped deck, Emily realized with horror the extent of the damage to her leg. Blood stained the seawater, and the ragged gashes were a terrifying testament to the shark's power. Rough hands applied pressure to the wound. Harsh shouts blended with the insistent thrum of the boat's motor and the swirling chaos in her mind as they raced toward shore. Once back on land, a blur of activity followed. Frantic calls to emergency services, the arrival of paramedics, the sting of antiseptics. It all faded into a haze against the overwhelming pain and fear that consumed Emily. Her vision blurred as they loaded her into the ambulance, Thomas's worried face disappearing into the distance. In the stark, fluorescent lights of the hospital, the news came as a further blow. While Emily would recover, the damage to her leg would require a long and painful rehabilitation. The physical scars would forever be linked to the emotional wounds of that day. Emily tentatively dipped her toes back into activities she once loved, but there was a hesitancy now, a wariness about the natural world that couldn't be easily erased. The beach, once her favorite sanctuary, became a place of unease. Still, a deep-seated determination pushed her forward. She refused to let the fear control her life entirely. The attack on the French Riviera became a cautionary tale whispered among the seaside towns. Emily and Thomas bore the visible and invisible scars of their encounter with the predator. They had stared into the abyss and survived. Dr. Amelia Carter scanned the endless expanse of Antarctic ice, her breath misting in the frigid December 21, 2006 air. From their small research vessel stationed at Palmer Station, she and her team, Ethan Taylor and Sophia Ortiz, were about to embark on a unique data collection mission. They were part of an international expedition studying the alarming effects of climate change on this fragile ecosystem. Amelia, an accomplished climatologist, had dedicated her life to studying the Earth's shifting patterns. The invitation to join this research expedition in Antarctica culminated in years of relentless work. Ethan, with his expertise in meteorology, brought an additional layer of understanding to their data collection, while Sophia, a marine biologist, focused on the expedition's underwater surveys. This crisp summer day in December 2006 was ideal for their mission. Their plan involved using a parasail outfitted with specialized monitoring equipment to gain a panoramic view of the melting ice flows and shifting glacier patterns. From their vantage point, they could track changes undetectable from ground level. The results of their work would be used to inform global initiatives aimed at mitigating the devastating impacts of climate change. Despite the desolate environment, the waters around Antarctica teemed with life, a complex food chain built around the abundance of plankton and krill. Seals, penguins, and whales were common sightings. While shark encounters were rare, they weren't unheard of. The team was briefed on the slim potential for encountering a Greenland shark, or perhaps the more remote possibility of a great white drawn to the area by unusual currents. Yet, the icy waters seemed an unlikely hunting ground for an apex predator accustomed to warmer climates. With their equipment meticulously calibrated, the day's work was progressing smoothly. Amelia, lost in her analysis of the shifting ice patterns, had a fleeting concern about their visibility as a brightly colored target against the stark white landscape. She pushed the worry aside, rationalizing that any curious creatures below would have long since acclimated to the research station's presence. Ethan is usually cheerful and points towards a crack in the ice far below them. It wasn't unusual to see seals sunning themselves, but something about this one's movement seemed odd. A knot of unease tightened in Amelia's stomach as they drifted closer. This was no seal. A massive dark shape moved beneath the surface, obscuring their view, the sleekness of its form impossible to mistake. Her heart hammered in her chest, a mix of disbelief and primal fear. Every instinct screamed at her to escape the predator lurking below the surface. The great white shark, a creature honed for killing, ascended with deceptive speed. Its gaping jaws could quickly engulf their brightly colored parasail whole. The boat was too far away, and their radio calls seemed to vanish into the vast nothingness of the icy landscape. The wind, once a gentle force propelling them, now whipped against them with chilling intensity. They were trapped, their fate tied to the whim of the predator circling just below, and time warped into a grotesque blur of panicked thoughts and desperate attempts to find a way out of this nightmare. The shark lunged, its immense body breaching the surface in an explosion of water and teeth. Fabric ripped and lines snapped under the relentless assault. Amelia, Ethan, and Sophia were sent tumbling, their screams whipped away by the unforgiving wind. Salt water stung their eyes, blurring their vision as the world around them became a chaos of thrashing limbs and churning water. Amelia felt the shock of icy water as she plunged below the surface. Her thick wetsuit was a meager defense against the numbing cold. Frantically kicking, she resurfaced with a gasp, her lungs burning, her movements sluggish in the frigid temperature. The monstrous form of the shark circled back, a constant, menacing presence in the murky water. Suddenly, a sharp crack of gunfire echoed across the ice. Confusion momentarily rippled through the shark's movements. The crew on their research vessel had spotted the attack and had reacted with surprising speed. Another shot rang out, the bullets hitting the water around the massive predator. It was a desperate attempt to distract it and buy the team some precious time. Hope surged as she saw a Zodiac inflatable craft speeding towards her. Its arrival felt like a miracle in the vast, unforgiving landscape. Amelia watched as the seemingly disoriented shark suddenly lashed out at the parasail. Ethan and Sophia were still entangled in the harness, desperately clinging to what remained of the fabric and lines. More gunshots rang out, and finally the shark retreated, dragging the remnants of the parasail with it. Rough hands hoisted Amelia into the inflatable, the relief mixed with terror over the fate of Ethan and Sophia. Moments later, another rescue craft sped past, carrying her teammates towards the station's safety. They were alive, but their ordeal was far from over.